Welcome to CarePod, a safe place to educate, inspire, and renew the caregiver. Listen in with our host, Dr. Kiplee Bell, as she interviews different experts along the caregiving journey.
So I'm really excited today to have an esteemed guest with us, Mr. Joseph Fuller, who manages the Future of Work project. He is the professor of management practice at Harvard. And another guest shared with me this important work as it pertains to the caregiver crisis in the workplace, I would posture. And this deeply resonated with me personally as I met a lot of the statistics, as we'll discuss in the article itself. You know, being in the sandwich generation, being, high level functioning clinician, yet caregiving not only my nuclear family, but also my primary parents. So really understanding, the importance of highlighting this particular niche in the workplace and how companies need to recognize, the tsunami of effect that's going to trickle down eventually, and how it's going to affect our economy if we don't make some changes. So thank you so much. Thank you for taking the time. I'm really humbled that you have graced me with your presence this morning and taken the time to share your work.
My pleasure to join you and your audience.
Yes. So I start every podcast out with the why. Why was this, kind of managing the future of work? Why was this research important to you? What do you hope to attain in the transformation in the workplace as a result of your research?
Well, Kiplee, we started the project as a subset of a broader project on the competitiveness of the U.S. economy. And there was no meaningful research going on at Harvard Business School on workforce issues. But some research we had done, some polling we had done, indicated that a lot of American executives felt that the workforce was a major contributor to America's historical competitiveness, but that was declining rapidly. And that kind of interested me. I was new to the faculty and asked what work was going on here on that topic. Was told nobody really studied that here, and so I raised my hand to look into it, not quite knowing what I was going to get myself into. Over time, that effort became more than half of the overall project, and our dean invited me to spin it out as its own project. And I was joined by a fellow professor, Professor Bill Curd, to run this project on a standalone basis. As we got into it, something that jumped out of the data was that workforce participation was a major issue in the United States, that it started declining for men around 2000. It leveled off for women around then. And as you look at our demographics and some interesting anomalies in the US economy, like the very substantial penetration of part-time work in the US, I got interested in what was either limiting people to part-time work or causing them not to participate at all. And that led me down a path that ultimately brought me right into the care space, because care is arguably the leading factor that inhibits women's participation in the workforce. That inhibition could be there are only a certain amount of hours they can work, or seasons they can work, or times of days they can work, or it forecloses possibilities altogether. And so you asked about our overall goal for the project. We study a lot of phenomena here. We study caregiving, we study skills attainment, education to employment transitions, the rise of the gig economy. And in each instance, what we're trying to do is get decision makers, particularly business executives, to ask themselves better questions, sharper questions, and to look at types of data they may not have looked at before. Because a consistent finding in our research is companies make sensible decisions using incorrect or incomplete data. and that therefore they're making what one would describe as a mistake, but they're not. It's not a willful mistake. It's a mistake of omission. That for example, in caregiving, very few companies think about caregiving as something that's going to drive voluntary turnover, someone to quit their job. Very few companies think about how could I make accommodations in my job descriptions, my terms of employment, so I could make current caregivers a pool of applicants that I could reach into. They're almost kind of oblivious to it as an issue. And that's the case in other areas as well. So we try to provoke them with research that's not written for other academics. It's written for interested people in management, commentators, uh, just people who are interested in the topic, and try to present them data that'll cause them to have a broader understanding of what's going on and a better sense of what they ought to be more interested in.
So profound. So there was a few things you said here. I'm so overwhelmed because it's important work that you're doing. It's incredible. So a couple of questions. Is it an HR sensitivity issue? Like when you talk about, executives being kind of oblivious to the caregiver plight in the workplace, what's the solution? Is the solution sensitivity around understanding that a caregiver and the caregiver policy in the workplace is separate from FMLA, it's separate from, COVID accommodations that we saw, it's separate from parental leave. How are we kind of ferreting out or making those lines of delineation of, the unique needs of the caregiver in the workplace? Where does that begin in terms of, then now creating solution-based systems?
That's a complicated question. The I would say our top priority is always actually to try to speak to the CEO or the owner of the business or the cabinet secretary at a state level or whomever it is. And we want to speak to them through in the language of and with data that supports that this is just a clear eyed, hard nosed economic choice. That it's not about being a good person or a nice organization. Being family friendly is great. But when you can convince someone that being family friendly makes your economics better, now you have their attention. As it relates to the human resources function, there are some wonderfully run human resources functions in large companies, but they're few and far between. And over time, they become more and more procedural, compliance oriented, and something that they avoid to the greatest degree possible is customization. It's hard to administer, and there's a great fear in HR organizations. Well, if I start accommodating what Sally wants, pretty soon Steve's going to want us the same thing. Or if I turn down, if I give up any benefit I'm going to introduce has got to be available to everybody at all points in their career. HR also inherits a benefit called healthcare, which is extremely expensive and getting more so. And they're, far back in the queue to get big budget increases every year. So they're under a lot of economic duress. Their philosophy is we've got omnibus rules for everybody. And care, as we know, is an area where very often care burdens change over the path of your life. They can be very intense and then not intense at all. They can be unpredictable or highly predictable. Your parents move in with you. That all of our parents, age to a point when you hope that they live that long. So they start needing support. Toddlers are different than teenagers, et cetera, et cetera. So they really need to understand that there are policies, for example, in giving caregivers support that reduce turnover and therefore reduce the need to engage in expensive recruiting, and and making a marginal investment in flexibility or care support for someone that keeps a valued worker from leaving your company is a great return on investment. And they got to hear that from the board of directors and the CEO,
Trickles
or they
down.
got to where they got to tell the CEO that and prove it. And that's what we're trying to get them to do.
And so what does that look like? What are the policies that decrease turnover in the workplace? Like what, if you're pitching to, the CEO to say, "Hey, this is what you need to do to firm up your bottom line."
Yeah.
What does that look like?
Well, the first thing you do is say, let's find out. I can tell you normatively that calendar flexibility, minimizing travel or work obligations at night, or having prior information about that, prior notice of that, stability in one's working hours, more discretion by supervisors to manage people. Just as a quick aside, many large companies will have a policy. Let's take a big retailer, national retailer, that if you're late for work 3 times in a quarter, you're fired.
Yeah, yeah.
And the supervisor could say, "You're my best worker. I know you're late because you're a single parent and you've got a kid with an undiagnosed medical condition and it's hard for you to get them to their appointments. And I hate to do this, but I literally there's nothing I can do about it. They're going to shut down your AI is going to shut down your paycheck in 2 weeks because it now knows in the data that you were late because you punched in late."
Yeah.
And so, it's hard to manage a big company with exceptions. Before, as a professor, I was a CEO. I get it, but this is not where we're saying we're going to hire Swedish nannies for everybody, or we're going to pay for your parents to go in a retirement community. You can affect 50, 60, 70% of the reasons, caregiving animated reasons that people quit their job, people you want to keep quit their job, with 8, 10, 12 pretty straightforward, affordable accommodations.
Now, are those accommodations different? I think, when I say different, are we reinventing the wheel, from what we already know or have in place for decades in the workplace in terms of the FMLA, recent COVID accommodations, remote work, et cetera?
Well, we've learned a lot because of a terrible tragedy of the pandemic. And one of the things I would say we'd learned that may not be in your listeners' minds when I said that is we've learned it's dangerous to make pronouncements about what the future is going to look like without experimentation. So a lot of companies are now drawing back on their one-time commitment to hybrid or remote work. And I know there's a lot of reaction in the press and it can be emotional issues, but a lot of these companies have pretty good data that their productivity has suffered. And, the mistake they made after COVID was saying, oh, we're going to go to 3 days a week, or oh, it can be all remote if you want, or oh, you can live everywhere you want, without understanding the consequences. Is there a lot we need to do? Well, we're beginning to see some innovation. And one of the other animating thoughts in our research in this area, if you look at changes in the workplace and in things like technology and even the evolution of benefits, it's when big companies start making use or seeing a need. Because big companies buy at scale, that attracts investment by suppliers or entrepreneurs to pursue that business. And all of a sudden, you get this virtual cycle of the unit cost starts to drop, the availability gets universal, it becomes more, consultants start talking about it, even professors start talking about it. What we need to do is to understand that care is a permanent feature in that it affects the career paths and career options for 100% of the adult population. Because even if you're single and have no immediate family, self-care is an issue, and we can see that in the mental health statistics. So there is no employer that does not have 100% of their workforce somehow affected by care. The effect could be
Absolutely.
benign now, unintrusive. Happily, I had three sons. They were all, within bounds, healthy, productive, organized teenagers. I had, as a parent, as parents, my wife and I had as easy a ride as you get. But so didn't intrude on our careers any more than having three dependents in the house normally would. But when my folks moved in with us, that was a completely different experience and, did disrupt our lives. So get to the point of how can you do customized accommodation along those common denominator issues.
Mm-hmm.
And as I said, if you've got someone with a extremely exotic set of circumstances, um, uh, there's a point at which the employer has a right to say that this is a very hard situation for you. We feel badly, but this is all we can do. I'm not saying that they should just absorb all costs and all responsibility, but if you look at the remote work data, the percentage of work attendance in companies with lots of facilities all around the country is correlated to two things. One is how old the worker is. Younger workers actually like going to work. They
Mm-hmm.
almost prefer going to work. It's part of their social life, and they often live in reasonably modest apartments with roommates, or they're living with their folks or the sibling. And so going downtown and seeing other people sounds great. Not arguing over the Wi-Fi. The other is commute time.
Mm.
So I live in Boston. Boston has bad traffic. It's gotten a lot better with a lot more remote work here. But if you are looking at 80 minutes in your car to get from southern New Hampshire to downtown Boston, if you've got to be there at 8:30 every morning
Right.
because your boss told you that, or
Right.
it's okay for you to show up at 10 o'clock, you're gonna save yourself 40 to 45 minutes in the car. Now you may end up getting home at 8 p.m. But once again, then you're not driving in the teeth of the people who are all leaving at 5:30 p.m. So I mean, it can be a lot of
Variables. Yeah.
fairly simple things.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and we're seeing some innovation to give you another example. A student of mine here started a company coming out of our school, Harvard Business School. The company's called Wealthy, Wellthy. It provides expert case management assistance to people who've got a healthcare oriented crisis in their family. We did a paper on the economics of that, one of these examples of how a small investment in a benefit can really improve the economics of a wealthy client. That's what the analysis proved completely definitively. The numbers were fabulous. But what that does is if you get that call from your mother or father who are retired and they live in Florida and you live in New York, and one of your parents says the other has just got an Alzheimer's diagnosis, and you're of course, upset, worried. You're not quite sure the parent who's telling you this news about the other parent is really up to managing the situation.
The next steps,
The next,
etc.
who you don't really even understand who insures them. Are they retired? Do they have, are they a former employer? Are they covered by government policy? Whatever else. For many people, that's I'm going to have to take a week off from work, fly down to Florida, and then try to figure this out. Probably, talking on the phone to my siblings, several of whom will have strong opinions, but no interest in going to Florida and taking charge. If you work at a company that provides Wealthy, you call up Wealthy. And they've got people who are extremely knowledgeable about cognitive care in Florida, who understand what insurance covers and doesn't, will know who the leading practitioners are there, and will be able to decode this because they do it every day. Interestingly, by the way, many of Wealthy's case managers are remote part-time workers who were in social work or the equivalent and then left the workforce because they have kids.
How about it? How about it?
This February, celebrate Black excellence, unity, and empowerment at the Impactful Black Collective. On February 22nd, 2025, join us at the Hilton Inn in Hamilton, New Jersey for an evening that will heal, empower, and educate. Network with trailblazers, showcase your business, and be inspired by powerful presentations designed to uplift our community. Vendors, don't miss out on your chance to shine. Limited spaces are available to connect your brand with passionate, like-minded individuals. Together, we celebrate history. Together, we build the future. Impactful Black Collective. Heal, empower, educate. Get your tickets now and secure your spot. Let's make an impact this February.
So it's a whole complete package.
And also we can't neglect the youth that are caregiving.
Yes.
So those that are caregiving that may have been raised by their grandparents that are
Mhm.
now of workplace age or in employment age, I should say, and that
Mhm.
are now in that unique caregiver situation.
Yes.
So there's a whole demographic there. So okay, I have a couple of questions. You spoke earlier about this kind of mistake of omission. How are you identifying the companies that are kind of on the frontier of this work? Where was the pool of data that you
Mhm.
pulled from,
Mhm.
and where does the emotion meet the data, right? So someone like you can champion this to say, hey, you know what, I have been fortunate enough to have managed my nuclear family well. The dynamic changed when my in-laws came into play, etc. So you can speak to it, to a sense. How do you have data meet emotion in terms of, obviously, the CEO who has that personal experience, is that's going to resonate with them more so versus one who may be more concerned with simply the bottom line, which your work is able to answer that question as well.
How do I find these companies? Happily, now we've got a big enough presence and kind of brand in our project. They often find me because they're contacting me and saying, "Well, we're providing this service, and would you be interested in talking or knowing more about us?" Also, I happen to be, in the kind of Harvard MIT ecosystem, which is a font of lots of startups. I talk to lots of senior executives in HR functions, and they'll start telling me about things or asking me about things, and I'll be saying, "Gee, I've never heard of that. Uh, let me could you tell me more? Can you introduce me?" In the case of the data on wealthy, um, we used they were gathering from their customers on utilization. They'd set up a very thoughtful way to capture data with their own very hard-nosed business logic, which is we want to capture data that we can use to show to potential clients about how the economics of this work. Now, you asked about where emotion joins up with this kind of economic analysis. My experience of the vast majority of employers is if you watch a Hollywood movie or some TV series, they characterize most business people in ways that have nothing to do with what I've observed about most business leaders. Most business leaders don't sit around rubbing their hands together saying, "How do I squeeze the last cent out of this
Right.
company?" The first thing they worry about is, am I running this in a good way? And am I a good person? Is this company providing good service? Is this a place people ought to want to work? Do people want to work here? And they'll give up a lot on the bottom line, not
For that.
everything, but to gain that. So they want to do nice things for people. They're just like your neighbors or your people you go to your house of worship with, or the alumni at the school you went to, whatever else. That's who they are. So if you can give them
Value.
a value and an economic case to do something that they know will be appreciated, they will move in that direction. If they have misconceptions about the cost, the complexity, the impact, then they won't. One perverse thing about when you talk to executives about caregiving benefits is you say, well, there are really good opportunities to improve retention through caregiving benefits. And before you can start your next sentence, they say, well, Professor Fuller, that's all fine and good, but we have a number of caregiving benefits and no one uses them, so we don't really think that there's much value to them. Then you say, well, what are your caregiving benefits? Oh, we have unpaid leave. Oh, that's a great benefit. We have a program where people can go to their coworkers and ask them to donate the coworkers'
The
vacation
PTO.
days to top up my leave to deal with my dying mother. Well, I mean, intimate friends at work might do that, but it's like when you get a pitch from a frequent flyer program, donate your miles back to us so we can give them to a charity. Well, it's your plane, what do my miles have to do with it? So those types of misconceptions, when you can start exploding them,
And
um,
that's, not to interrupt you, but
yeah,
that's the mistake of omission.
right,
That's the
exactly.
mistake of omission, and that's where you lose the productivity and, frankly, the motivation to work, right? The motivation to obtain the mission of said company. So, yeah, it's so important. So, okay, let's land it, right? Tell me, where are we going? Where do you go from here on a national level in terms of redefining policy, nationally in terms of workplace culture?
I think that it's difficult to imagine a intervention by the federal government that's likely to happen that addresses these problems. Part of that has to do with operating a federal system. Part of it has to do with the government is not looking to add more things to spend money on. So I think what the government can do is to look at policy through the lens of what encourages companies to address some of these problems. So, for example, there are federal policy and certain state policies do make it scary for a company to say, I'm going to decide which benefits are actually available to whom in the company. That can be viewed as, well, we want to make sure everyone's treated, quote, fairly or not. But that has the effect of, let's say, a first 5 days of emergency kid child care provided by care.com or someone like that is on the company, or and then somebody who doesn't have kids but has a pet says, well, I want that for my pet. And if I can't put up fences around who can use what for what purpose. Similarly, the laws about what's called a cliff vest in, a sharp break in, for example, who you have to cover with benefits based on their number of hours.
Hmm.
It's pretty widely accepted now that the hours threshold in the Affordable Care Act led to a 2% shift in the labor market from full-time employment to part-time employment. That's a big shift. That's a lot of people. So you want to revisit policy from that perspective. You can jawbone companies, but the biggest thing is to get companies to make these decisions for themselves. And government workforce suffers from lots of job vacancies, and it's getting to be less attractive place to work. So governments are big employers, and they could also lead the way and start driving some of that scale effect I talked about earlier
Exactly.
if they adopted more progressive approaches to this.
Yeah, thinking outside the box. Absolutely. Absolutely. So tell us, is the research in flux? Is this particular, management of the future of work complete?
Oh,
Where are
no,
you
no,
kind
no,
of in the, yeah, where are you in the
no.
continuum now, and
Um,
going forward?
we'll be cranking out lots of research this year about AI in the workplace, about how employees define a good job. And, you know, spoiler alert, higher wage female workers count the caregiving policies and flexibility of their employers as a very important determination of whether or not they're going to stay. We'll be publishing on transitions from education to employment, particularly how to young people mostly make decisions about what to study and what assumptions they make about what kind of careers that's going to open to them. There are a lot of research about what people should do economically, but doesn't start with an understanding of what they actually do, which is what my research is focused on. So a lot more to come, including in the care space.
Absolutely. Well, I am honored that you took the time. I really am. Important work that you're doing. And thank you to your team as well. The staff writer put the cadence of care. I love that term because essentially that's what we're all trying to achieve, a proper cadence in the work that we do. So I appreciate your time and thanks so much again for being here.
My pleasure, Dr. Bell.
Thank you.
Great information right from the source. For more information on how to caregive like a boss, check out impactfulcaregiving.com. Want to be a guest on the show? Contact us at CarePod at impactfulcaregiving.com.